Today's video is coming from the DC airport in Washington, and we're going to go cover one of the most common cold email questions that I get asked. We're going to go cover strategy questions. We're going to go cover technical and deliverability questions, targeting, research, performance, and optimization. And then at the end, what are some common challenges that people run into, and then how could they overcome them? So let's jump in. How could I effectively write cold email subject lines? What you want to do here is you want to make sure that your subject line invokes curiosity. The main goal of what a subject line does is you want to have people click on your email because you're fighting for attention in their inbox. In terms of best practices here, you make sure that your cold email subject line is less than 4 words and it's under 44 characters. The reason why is if it's anything more than that, whenever it's on their phone, if they click into the Gmail app or into their mail app, they won't be able to see the full subject line. Once they don't know exactly what the full subject line is, you have a lower likelihood of them opening up your email in the first place. Next, what's the ideal cold email length? You want to make sure that your cold emails are under 8 words, and that includes your intro and then your sign off. How do I personalize cold emails at scale? You want to use a tool called Play.com. What's the best cold email structure or templates? When it comes to structures, I'll typically do a 2-step or a 3-step sequence if it's a mass scale campaign. If you have a smaller TAM and you really have to increase volume, what I'll do here is I'll have more steps in the sequence. However, I'll have soft CTAs, and I'm not necessarily going to be asking the prospects all the time to jump on a meeting. If you have a small TAM, you really want to provide those prospects with a white glove service. And the last thing you want to do is just burn your TAM. How many follow-ups should I send? Similar to like the previous point, if it's a mass scale campaign, I only like having 2 follow-ups as the max, mainly because any more than that, you'll typically have prospects that will mark your emails as spam, and that will only hurt future deliverability. On the topic of deliverability, how do you avoid spam filters? What you want to do here is you want to do everything that the opposite of what a spammer would do. So you want to have your location, you want to have your company name, you want to be using branded emails, you want to be able to, you don't have too many links, Google, Outlook, Yahoo, they're going to go think that there could be some phishing attempts here. And you want to make sure that your email looks personalized. It looks like it's real. There's no typos. And if you do that, then that's typically how you could avoid some spam filters. What's a good open rate for cold emails? Typically, I don't even track open rates. If you're doing a nurturing campaign to the prospects that already know you, they opted in through a Facebook ad, that's when you can start tracking open rates because the prospect is already looking for your email. However, when it comes to cold email deliverability, if you do have a tracking pixel, it's something else. It's extra weight onto an email, and then Google, Yahoo, and Outlook, they see that as a red flag. Next, how do I warm up my email domain? What you want to do here is you want to use lookalike domains to your main domain. So if my domain is Connor.com, I would try getconnor.com. I would create email accounts for that domain, and then I would use it like Instantly Smart Lead to warm up those emails. Should I use a separate domain for cold outreach? Absolutely yes. You don't want to risk your primary domain. What tools or softwares should I use? Instantly or Smart Lead is pretty good right now. When it comes to targeting and research, how do I find email addresses? You could use .com to do a waterfall enrichment. However, that could become quite costly. You could use tools like ZoomInfo, Apollo, Lucia, and there's a host of others. But I'd typically say start with Apollo. It's probably going to be the cheapest data to get. And then as you need to get more coverage of your TAM, start using a waterfall enrichment tool like Play.com. So how do I research prospects effectively? One thing I do right now is I'll use the web research feature that OpenAI has, and is actually quite good at finding specific information about a prospect. So if you put in like the first name, last name, city, and then organization name, you'll typically get AI to return some pretty unique information. What makes a good cold email list? Typically, you want to think about a cold email list in a few ways. You want to think about it as what's the competition around this list? If you know that every single other person is pulling the same data from a data source like Apollo, you already know that that list is going to be absolutely decimated. So the approach that I would take here is to find a list, whether it's a private list, like you're pulling a conference list, and you're able to have a message that no one else in the market could replicate, because that's how you could stay unique among a crowded market. Next, where are we? How do I segment my cold email campaigns? Typically, I segment my campaigns by the types of persona targeting. So whether I'm reaching out to owners, directors, managers, so on the actual persona level. And then I'll also segment my list and my campaigns by the list. So if I'm using a very popular data source or a second data source, that would be a little bit lesser known. When it comes to performance and optimization, what would be a good response rate for cold emails? If you send the best cold email in the world, I don't think that you're going to be getting more than 50% response rates. If I sent 10, 15 emails to my mom, I almost think that she'd only get back to me 3 to 4 times. It just so happens that people are busy. Sometimes they don't see every single email. And the expectation as like the max would be 15% in my eyes. In terms of what deliverability would be in terms of a response rate, typically if you have under a 1% response rate, you'll have a deliverability issue. So anything between 1 to 15% would be my scale of what I would see reasonable. If you're reaching out to a mass scale market, if you have a conversion rate of anything between 1 to 4%, that's fairly good. If you're reaching out to a very targeted list and list size might be 2,000 or 3,000 prospects in size, if you have a 3 to a 8% response rate, that's typically what I would see as well. Okay. How do I A/B test cold emails? Typically what I do here is you could A/B test the subject line fairly easily. If you're using a tool like Instantly.ai, they have an AZ test feature where you just have to select add a variant, you copy the body text, and then you're able to just simply change the subject line. So I'll typically make variations on the call to action and then the subject line as well. When is the best time to send cold emails? I like sending them Monday to Friday. Some people send them 7 days a week. But one thing to point out here, though, is if you're sending a campaign between Eastern time, 8 to 5, if you have some prospects that are on the West Coast, that 9 to 5 could be like a 6 to 3. So typically what I'll do is I'll start my Eastern campaigns a little bit later, just so that if I do send an email to a prospect at 7 or 7:30 or 8, it's still not early. I find typically sending an email to someone at 6 a.m. a little bit too early in the US, but that's my take. How do I track my cold email metrics? Typically what you could do here is you could use Instantly or Smart Leads analytics section on their platforms. However, you could also track those analytics, push the data out to an Airtable or to a Google Sheets just so that you could have more granular data and you can see everything in front of you instead of having to click through different campaigns. What are some common challenges around cold email? Why aren't people responding to cold emails? I would just ask yourself, hey, would you respond to this cold email yourself if you're in your prospect's shoes? Typically, emails that you send are garbage. And if people just had a little bit of honesty with their cold emails, they'd probably realize that they need to dial in their copy, dial in their messaging, dial in their offer a bit more. How do I handle rejection of negative responses? Always be professional. You don't want to ever leave a negative response to the market. It's just for building a brand over time. If someone says they're not interested, say, hey, thanks for getting back to me. I hope you have a great rest of your day. What mistakes should I avoid in cold emailing? Doing the same thing for weeks on end and not split testing anything. Because if you don't try new things, you'll simply always receive the same results that you're currently getting. And last question of the day is, how do I scale a cold email campaign? Buy more domains, buy more email accounts, put in more leads into your email sequencer, and then that should work. So that's today's video. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, comment below, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.